Young shared this experience with me, and I'd like to share it with you. Bob had had several heart attacks, and the doctors told him that there was not any more they could do for him. And as he said, he was in his easy chair, and his chest was hurting, and then all of a sudden, he was there in heaven, and he saw this huge wall, and he looked to the left and to the right, and it was as far as he could see both directions. There were angels dancing on top of the wall, and the gate that was in front of him was massive, and he was looking at it when it swung open, and there on the other side was Jesus standing. And Jesus said, "Bob, come over, I want to show you some things." So Bob stepped through the gate to the other side, looked behind him, and the wall had disappeared. It was gone. And Jesus took him by his hand, and they started to walk down this path. Bob said it was a golden color, but clear, like the streams in northwest Arkansas. You could see the bottom, but it had no bottom. And he stepped on the path and kind of stepped heavily because he wanted to make sure it would hold him. And they started walking down the path. And on either side of the path was grass, lush grass, but they said it wasn't grass as we know it, but it was a living thing. And as they were walking, he said he felt something watching him, and he looked over, and this big tiger was watching them. And there between the front paws of the tiger was a bunny rabbit. And Bob just marveled at that. And he said, "Don," he said, "there were animals there in heaven that I've never seen before." He said, "I've looked in encyclopedias, and I can't find those animals." And he said it was just strange, but they were there. And he looked down the path, and there was a lake. And he could tell it was a lake by it was shimmering. And they walked down to the edge of the water, and Jesus reached down and with 2 fingers touched the water, and then lifted up and touched Bob's lip. And when he touched the lip, Bob said all that pain went away. And he said, but as he touched it, his sleeve on his robe fell down, and there in his wrist was a scar. He said, I always thought that he had scars in the palm of his hand, as pictures I had seen, but this was in his wrist. And as he thought about it, he said there was someone behind us. So I turned around and said, there was my mother. In this life, Bob's mother was a large woman, but he said, Don, she was regular size, and standing beside her was my sister, who was a heavy woman, and she was regular size. And then standing beside her was my little brother. She was regular size. My little brother was born too quickly after I was born, and he didn't gain strength, and he died. Said, but that was my little brother. I knew him, and it was wonderful to see them. He also could see off in the distance a great city, and she just said, do you want to go see the city? And Bob said, yes. And so they were just there. They didn't walk there, they were just there. And he said it was just beautiful. And there were mansions on either side of the boulevards, and the boulevards had names, some named after the apostles. And they walked down the street and came to this big worship hall. And this worship hall was just filled with millions of people, and there was God. But he said, I couldn't tell if it was God because I didn't recognize him, of course. But the millions of people, that the ones that were in the back of the hall were just as close to him as the ones in the front of the hall. And he said, I didn't understand that. And then we went to this big dining hall, and he said that table that was set was as far as you could see, both directions. And he showed me my chair, and he said, there was my chair. It said Bob on it. But the chair next to it was Jesus's chair. And Bob said, no, I can't sit next to you. And Jesus said, Bob, all of my children sit next to me. Then he understood that space, as we know it, has no meaning in heaven. And that's a story of Bob's experience. And I hope I remember all the parts. But thank you for listening. Bye-bye.